So yeah, let's move to the next part of this WTIR playlist. In previous playlist we have discussed about VPN proxy server. So यार हमने VPN proxy server इन सब के बारे में बात कर ली थी. Now in this playlist we are going to discuss about the another thing, that is the case study of this Apache web server. This can came in your exam like for 5 marks, that write the short note on what is the case study of this Apache server, or a direct question come what is Apache server and all that. Okay, and I told you earlier, if you are a CS student, so knowing these things is must for you. Okay, so let's without wasting time, let's start. What is this Apache web server? And we'll discuss another concept, that is web graph also, and we'll discuss a domain name system and all that. So just start with the web server. So Apache web server, before that I have written these small points like you can see here, that is IIS. This is basically a type of web server which is, was developed by the Microsoft, and it is basically present in your Windows. Okay, so it's a kind of web server. Now before discussing the types of web server, like we have seen IIS web server, this was the server that was developed by the Microsoft. So what is web server? Web server, basically you can understand, it is basically a simply a software, okay, which is basically providing you the response when you are requesting something. So it basically what it contains, it contains the collection of web pages. Okay, and web pages basically the HTML, CSS and images, videos and text and all that. Okay, so web server is basically what it contains, it contains the data which is in the form of websites, or it contains web pages. So what happen whenever you as a client or a user goes on to the browser, you just put their your query, you search something, so you are just requesting to the web server which contains all the data in the forms of websites and web pages. So web server will give you the response. Okay, so web server is basically simply a software that contains the collection of web pages, websites and all that. So simply this is the web server. Okay, so और आप इसमें अपने CS में अपनी इसमें जो भी आपकी BTech BCA MCA जो भी है, इसमें आप वेब सर्वर वगैरह ये बेसिक जर्नल टर्म्स हैं जो आपको पता होनी चाहिए डेफिनेटली. और एक मॉडल आता है, दैट इज या फिर आर्किटेक्चर भी कहते हैं जिसको क्लाइंट सर्वर आर्किटेक्चर या फिर क्लाइंट सर्वर मॉडल, दैट इज ऑल्सो मस्ट फॉर यू. ओके, क्लाइंट सर्वर में क्या होता है, क्लाइंट एज अ यूजर, जैसा मान लो आप एक क्लाइंट हो, यू आर अ क्लाइंट. ओके, यू आर अ यूजर. सर्वर, क्लाइंट सर्वर की बात कर रहे हैं तो क्लाइंट सर्वर, सर्वर इज द वेब सर्वर where this complete information or the data is stored. So what it basically stored, it stores the web pages, websites and all that. So you as a client are putting request and server will provide you the you are providing you are giving the request to the web server for any kind of information, and server will give you the response for that. So this is the web server basically. Okay, now you can just go through ahead so that we can understand better. So IIS, I told you. Now the another version is IIS 7.0, that is more secure, more reliable and all that. Okay, it supports HTTP, HTTPS, FTP and all that. So the advanced version of this IIS is this one. So let's discuss the important thing, that is the case study. Case study of this Apache web server we will discuss. Okay, the case study of this Apache web server. So basically the Apache web server, also referred as HTTPD. Here HTTP, you know, hypertext transfer protocol, and D I think stands for daemons, or I think this is a kind of, I don't know exactly what this is. HTTPS D means web server. This Apache web server is also referred as this. Why it is known as, we will discuss. So this Apache web server is basically a open source software. Open source software means it is available publicly. Okay, and which is available under the license this Apache version, Apache license version 2. See, it is open source. Open source means it is free for you. If you want the code of this, so you can easily get onto the web. Okay, you can easily get, and you can just do some changes, or you can customize that code for making your particular web server. So this is the main thing of this, the meaning of this open source is this. See, it was developed by the group of programmers, and the first version was developed in 1995 using the NCSA HTTPD. Now what is this NCSA? So, and NCSA is also a type of web server. So it is stands for basically National I think National National Center Supercomputing Application. Okay, so this is basically the type of web server on which this Apache web server was built. So the first version was built in 1950 using this web server on as the basic. Okay, so this NCS HTTPD web server is acting as a base for this Apache web server. Now the source code of this software is available for free. देखो मैंने भी बताया था आपको, I told you previously, मैंने आपको बताया था कि the source code है इसका वो free है. अगर आपको कुछ चेंज करने, कुछ कस्टमाइज वेब सर्वर बनाना है अपना, कुछ खुद का कुछ चेंज करके, तो इसका जो कोड है दैट इज अवेलेबल फ्री, यू कैन इजीली गेट इट. दैट्स व्हाई इट इज नोन एज ओपन सोर्स. ओपन सोर्स एक टेक्निकल टर्म है, अच्छी टर्म है, आपको पता होना चाहिए इसके बारे में. सो इसका जो सोर्स कोड है इज अवेलेबल फॉर यूजर्स कैन अडेप्ट द सॉफ्टवेयर. ओके, यू कैन इजीली अडॉप्ट दिस सॉफ्टवेयर. मैंने बताया सॉफ्टवेयर ही है, वेब सर्वर है बट इट इज ऑल्सो अ सॉफ्टवेयर. So the development of Apache server followed the same path as the Linux operating system. So the development, जो development हुआ इस Apache web server का, it is following the same path जैसे कि जो Linux एक operating system है उसका था, and was written for Linux. So first this Apache web server was basically written for Unix operating system. Okay, and the newer version runs under the Windows. तो पहला जो version था Apache का that was basically built or that was basically written for the Unix operating system, but the newer version basically runs under the Windows. Okay, so this is about this. Another important point that it is also called as Apache server. See, this Apache web server is also known as Apache server. Now what is this Apache server? So because the Apache servers basically in which we have patches. Now we will discuss what is this patches. So as it was developed from NCSA code along with a variety of patches. See, मैंने अभी आपको बताया कि जो Apache वेब सर्वर था वो एक NCSA वेब सर्वर था जो उसको बेस बना के ही बनाया गया था, ठीक है, बट उसमें कुछ हमने पैचेस भी यूज किए थे, इसलिए हम इसको पैची सर्वर भी कहते हैं. अब ना व्हाट इज दिस पैचेस की बात करते हैं यार, ये पैचेस क्या है यहाँ पे. तो पैचेस बेसिकली भाई ये हैं कि जो पैचेस होते हैं एक स्मॉल पीस ऑफ कोड जिसको हमने लिखा है कुछ अपडेट करने के लिए, कुछ बग आ गया उसको फिक्स करने के लिए, कोई न्यू वर्जन आया है उसमें उसको ऐड ऑन करने के लिए एक पीस ऑफ कोड को हम पैचेस कहते हैं, जो कि हम अपने कंप्लीट कोड में, कंप्लीट प्रोग्राम में, कंप्लीट सॉफ्टवेयर में उस पैच को हम ऐड कर देते हैं, जिससे जो हमारा बग है वो रिजॉल्व हो जाएगा, या फिर हमको कुछ अपडेट करना है तो वो अपडेट हो जाएगा, कोई न्यू फीचर ऐड करना है वो हो जाएगा, कोई न्यू वर्जन लाना है वो हो जाएगा. तो क्या करा हमने, एक सिंपल पैच को बनाया और उसको ऐड कर दिया. अब पैच क्या है मैंने बता दिया ना, एक पीस ऑफ कोड है जिसको हमने या तो किसी बग रिजोल्यूशन के लिए किया है या फिर कोई न्यू फीचर ऐड करने के लिए किया है एंड ऑल दैट. सो दैट्स व्हाई इट इज नोन एज पैची सर्वर आल्सो, because it also contains some kind of patches, variety of patches is contained. So this was all about this web server, the Apache web server. Now let's move to the another topic, that is web graph. See, this is very easy, very easy, very much. The web graph is very much easy. See, before knowing web graph, basically let's discuss what is this graph. So graph is basically the collection of two things. First is node and another is edges. Nodes and edges. Nodes are also known as vertices and edges are also known as connections between these vertices. So see, a graph is basically a collection of nodes and edges. So this web graph is also the collection of these nodes, and link between them is done by the edges. So see here, I have written this point with the red pen that it is a directory graph. Directory graph basically means which has direction. Undirected which does not have any direction. So directed means it has direction. Now Larry Page and Sergey Brin came with the idea of the maintaining a web graph. Now Larry Page and Sergey Brin, they basically came out of this idea to maintain this web graph. Firstly they came, okay. Now I think you know who is Larry Page and Sergey Brin. They are the founder of Google, okay. So they have both I think they were studying in Stanford and met each other, and then they started discussing and they just work on something, search engine they basically work, and that was basically in future they now it is also known as Google, the famous search engine. So basically these both are the founders of Google, and they basically came out with the idea of this maintaining a web graph. And see, on the next point is, in web graph every web page is represented by a node. Okay, node मैंने आपको बताया था, node is basically also known as vertex. So यहाँ पे जो web page है वो represent कर रहा है as a node, और a page pointing to another page through a hyperlink, and that hyperlink is basically acting as the जो link है उसको हम कहते हैं as a edge. So जो web page है it is acting as a node, और जो web pages के बीच में connection है या फिर link है it is like a edge. ओके या फिर कनेक्शन कह सकते हो या फिर लिंक कह सकते हो, कुछ भी कह सकते हो, ठीक है. फॉर योर बेटर अंडरस्टैंडिंग यू कैन रेफर टू एनी वर्ड. दे आर द कनेक्शन इन यूनिडायरेक्शन. देयर आर कनेक्शंस इन यूनिडायरेक्शन. यूनिडायरेक्शन का मतलब देखो, पहला तो है डायरेक्टेड, अनडायरेक्टेड. डायरेक्टेड विच हैज डायरेक्शन, अनडायरेक्टेड विच डज नॉट हैव एनी डायरेक्शन. फिर डायरेक्टेड के अंदर दो आते हैं, यूनिडायरेक्शनल एंड बाई डायरेक्शनल. यूनिडायरेक्शनल बेसिकली विच इज इन वन डायरेक्शन ओनली, ओके, विच इज इन वन डायरेक्शन. So unidirectional is basically in one direction and bidirectional is having two direction. So these web graphs are basically unidirectional, means they are having only one direction. So web graph, basically, see another point, they are used in IR to analyze the structure of the web and how they navigate basically. So this web graph is basically used in information retrieval system. That's our main our subject, and why it is used to basically understand the structure of the web page and basically how they are navigating to each other. Okay, so web graph is very much important and very much easy to understand. Okay, let's see, here I have mentioned a diagram of this web graph. See, A B C and D and then E, so they are connecting through a edge. Now A is basically a web page that links to the web page B. C, B and C, they both are also the web pages, and they are connecting to the D and E. They are basic, D and E also are the web pages, and the connection between them is basically a hyperlink. Okay, now you can say edges. So A is a web page that is link, or you can say connected to the web page B and C through a hyperlink. So this is the simple graph of simple diagram of web graph. If web graph came into your exam, so you can easily get the easily you can get the marks. You should write these points, these important points you should write. After that, you just draw this diagram, so you will definitely get the good marks. And I am also very much assured that you have uh, now you have the clear cut understanding of what is this web graph and what is this Apache server. Okay, so now it is all for today. In next video, in next part, we will discuss about this domain name system. This is very much important and very much interesting to know. When if you don't know domain name system, and I will tell you, then you will be surprised that okay, this is the thing which is working behind the. Okay, so for this, just go to the next, wait for the next lecture. Till then, thank you.